Hello and welcome to your Fantasy Premier League one-stop shop. I'm your host, Stephen Gallagher, world number 3 in points total over the past 3 seasons. Today I'll be discussing my Game Week 1 team. I should clarify that the players I'm showing you aren't 100% locked into my team, but I'll discuss the players that I'm considering at each price point and you'll get an idea for the team structure that I'm going for. Let's get started with the goalkeepers. If you haven't watched my last video, I discussed my FPL strategy for setting up my Game Week 1 team that has helped me get 3 consecutive top 10k finishes, so go ahead and watch that if you haven't yet. In that video I discussed how I like to start by building my team from the bench, and that starts with a 4 million goalkeeper who I don't expect to play and a 4.5 million goalkeeper. This season I think Dean Henderson is the standout option at 4.5 mil. I think there's a bit too much uncertainty elsewhere, and Palace were 5th in expected goals conceded in the league last year. Glasner has been really positive since joining, and Sam Johnson, the other goalkeeper at Palace, is set to leave, and Matthews is there as backup. If you want a 4 million goalkeeper to back up, a little combination you could go for is Dean Henderson and Matthews. The thing this does is it prevents you from having more than one Crystal Palace outfielder. Could be an issue for you. Other 4.5 million options, I would say the standout for me is Sells at Nottingham Forest, who were 3rd in expected goals conceded in the second half of last season. The issue there is that Miguel is another goalkeeper in the Nottingham Forest camp who could potentially be taking minutes from Sells. We don't know for 100% sure the situation at Nottingham Forest, so the minutes aren't 100% certain, which is why for me Dean Henderson is the standout pick. Usually I wouldn't recommend goalkeepers above the 4.5 million mark, but pickings are pretty slim this season, and I think 5.5 million for Raya is a really good, cheap way into the Arsenal defence. If you don't have any defenders from Arsenal, you could just go for Raya. If you want to splurge a little bit more on your goalkeeper, they are the best defence in the league. I think it could be a good shout this season. At 5 million, I think Pickford is the standout shout as well. He's great value if Everton can maintain the defensive quality that they showed last season. They were 4th in expected goals conceded after Arsenal, City and Liverpool. Obviously Onana has left to Villa, who played a big role defensively, obviously from the midfield role, but that's something to keep an eye on. But I do think Everton will continue their defensive form, and Pickford at 5 million is a great way into that defence. On to the 4 million defenders. I think Barco is the obvious choice here. He's been taking corners in pre-season. Estupiñán is set to miss the start of the season, and who's to say when Estupiñán comes back that he drops Barco? Who knows, maybe Barco makes the spot his own. He's not fully nailed on though, and the position is his to lose, but at 4 million I think it's worth it for me. Now Brighton did sign a new fullback, Ferdi Kaggioglu. I think I'm pronouncing that right. He could also take minutes from Barco, but he can also play right back, which is a weak point in the Brighton team currently. So I think a lot of managers who have Barco are hoping that Kaggioglu just slides into that right back role. It's a wait and see, I think. Next, onto the 4.5 million defenders, and like I talked about in my last video, it's nice to have a little rotation going here. The example I've used is Robinson and Hall. I think there's many 4.5 million options, and this combination stands out to me because not only do they have really good underlying data, but their fixtures do rotate really well. Caveat for Hall is the competition in his role. He should start the season, but with Trippier, Livramento, Burn all competing for full-back spots, Burn not so much, he can't play the left centre-back role. Hall's minutes aren't 100% secure, so one thing to keep an eye on. Other 4.5 million options I'm considering are Mykolenko. He's nailed in the Everton defence, which, like I said, 4th best in the league for expected goals conceded last season. Quansah. Pre-season, Slot has indicated that he may be nailed in the Liverpool side. For 4.5 million away into the Liverpool side, that's very good value if he can keep his spot. I know Konate is the competition there. I think it's Quansah's to lose for now. Also, Aina in the Nottingham Forest defence, who, like I said, very good statistically last season. He's another good option at 4.5 mil. On to the first bench option, and one thing I want to discuss here is formation. I like to play a 3-5-2. Midfielders outperform forwards and every other position. Last season, 5 midfielders got over 200 points. Only 2 forwards managed to get over 200 points. No defenders, no goalkeepers. I like a cheap forward in the first bench spot for this reason, because I like to invest a bit more into the midfield. And I think the 6 to 5.5 million forward spot has a lot of good options, namely João Pedro, Muniz and Wood. Now, João Pedro is 0.5 million cheaper and on pens, which neither Muniz or Wood are. Andres Pereira takes penalties for Fulham, and Morgan Gibbs-White takes penalties for Nottingham Forest. You'd expect that to continue. I know Brighton's fixtures are poor, but if you had him, you'd only need him on the bench there in the case that one of your midfielders or forwards doesn't play for whatever reason. I also like to have a 6 million or less starting midfielder. Now, comparing the 6 million mids, Jacob Murphy is a good option. There are other standard options statistically, like Elliott and Bob, who are 5.5 and 5 million respectively. Other options: Emile Smith-Rowe, Rodgers, Hudson-Odoi, Amad Diallo, Brereton Diaz. There's a lot of players that if you get the right one, you could be in for a winner. Based off last season's data, I do think these are the 3 standout options. Bear in mind, Bob only played around 300 minutes in the Prem, so not a lot of data to base him off, but he's looked great whenever he's played. And these 3 players have all had really good pre-seasons. Now, minutes are an issue for all of them, hence why they're priced at 6 million or less. Each player has a lot of competition in their roles, but I think Murphy has the least competition. It's just Almiron currently, and he could be moving, unless also they sign another right winger, which Newcastle are in the market for. Until then, Murphy will start the season at right wing, I think, for Newcastle. The next price point I want to target is a premium defender. This could be any of Saliba, Gabriel, or Gvardiol for me. Also Trent Alexander-Arnold. I do think Arsenal, they have the best defense in the league last season. Gabriel's data is better, but minutes are less secure with Calafiori. And I just think Saliba is a lock into that Arsenal defense. Gvardiol, also a great pick if he plays in a similar role to last season. I think that's the thing we're all waiting to see. Will he play as attacking as he did last year? And if he does, he's definitely a great pick to have in your team. Quick note on Trent Alexander-Arnold. I think with the new manager, we'll have to wait and see what he looks like under Slot, but based off preseason, he has looked very advanced. It's just whether he's worth that extra 1 million than one of these 3 players that I mentioned. It's a wait and see for me. The next price point I'm targeting is the 6.5 million mid. It's between Nkunku and Bailey for me. Nkunku is more of an unknown factor. He had 51 goal contributions in the 21-22 Bundesliga and 29 goal contributions in the 22-23 season. Obviously, this was in the Bundesliga, so it's a completely different league, different teams, but we know he has potential for amazing attacking output if he can stay fit. That's the biggest caveat, and one that I think a lot of managers this season are willing to take a risk on. Bailey is the other one tempting me. His data is amazing, and we know he can do it in the Prem. What's more to say there? Next up is Isak. Like I said in my last video, he's a great asset to have, especially at that price, 8.5 million. He's on pens, 21 goals last season. If he can stay fit, he's a great pick for your FPL team, and I think a lot of people will have him at the start of the season. Next up, I'll get this one out the way. I've got Haaland up top. 21 goals last season, and he was average, is what people said. He looks sharp in pre-season. I think you do need at least one of Haaland or Salah to protect your rank. And I don't think having 2 is worth it necessarily in terms of compromising the rest of your team, starting 5 million mids every week. I'm likely to go just for Haaland. And for me, there's a few points going against Salah. With Klopp leaving after almost a decade in charge, you'd expect a hangover period for Liverpool. Although they do have the players and they have looked great in pre-season, and we know Slot is a good manager based off what I've seen from him at Feyenoord. The thing maybe stopping me is that Salah finished last season very poorly, and Slot has been playing Salah in wide areas during the pre-season. Maybe all this analysis is a way for me to cope with and justify my decision to drop Salah, the king of FPL historically over the past 7 seasons, but I've made my decision and I'm going for Haaland over Salah, but I'm not 100% convinced by this decision, and I think if you've gone the other way or for both, definitely viable options. I would say going for one is a more viable option based off the rest of your team and the structure that allows you, but it's a toss-up between Haaland and Salah. It's whether that 2.5 million that you're saving by going for just Salah, what you can do with that in your team. You can do quite a lot. It's a decision that every manager will need to make this season. The next price point I'm targeting is the 10 million midfielder. It's between Saka, Palmer and Son, and looking at their data last season, non-pen expected goals per 90 against expected assists per 90, there is really not much to separate these guys on. One thing I will note is that Son and Palmer overperformed their XG last season, whereas Saka underperformed his just slightly. But the previous season, Saka did overperform his XG by quite a bit, and that means we know he does have the ability to overperform his XG. They're all great options, and I've stuck Saka in for now to this draft, but it could be any 3 in your team. I think they all provide really good value, and it's just about having the right one at the right time. What I also will say is that these guys are essentially, you would hope, fixture proof. So you're going to play them every week no matter what. You can target fixtures with these guys, obviously easier fixtures. You'd expect them to score more goals, but don't be afraid to play these guys against big teams because they are the main guys for their team for the most part, and they will get you points no matter what. Now, with all this being said, I think you can get your team to a really good structure with these price points that I've targeted, and then you only have to decide on 3 more positions. And I know that sounds easy, but there's a lot of different combinations that you can create with the budget that you have left. The first option that I have here is where you pretty much spread the funds evenly. You get that 7 million defender in Trent, and you have a 7 million midfielder and a 7.5 million midfielder. The examples I've gone for here, like I said, Trent, Eze at 7 million and Diogo Jota at 7.5 million. These are all great options at these price points. Another combination you can go for is a 6 million defender, a 7 million midfielder, and an 8.5 million midfielder. So downgrading that defender slot so you can upgrade the 7.5 million midfielder slot to a 7.5 million mid. In this case, we've gone for Gabriel. It's an Arsenal defensive double up, which I don't think a lot of people will have, so that could be a potential differential, but the 6 million defender could also be a Robertson, could also be a Gvardiol, and we've gone for Bruno Fernandes at the 8.5 million slot, which can also be Odegaard. It's just another combination that you can go for. Alternatively, we downgrade the defender slot again to a 5.5 million defender. In this case, you upgrade that 7 million midfielder to a 7.5 million mid, and you keep the 8.5 million midfielder. So there we go, we have Porro at the 5.5 million defender slot, and we've upgraded Eze to Diogo Jota at 7.5 million. That's another nice option if you want to go for that combination. Alternatively, we downgrade again. We take 1 million out of the defender slot down to a 4.5 million defender and up to a 10.5 million midfielder, which can be Palmer. And we've also downgraded the other midfielder slot to 6.5 mil. In this instance, you can go for a Mikolenko, you could go for a Bailey, and then Palmer in those slots. I think it's important to realize you do have the option to go for all these different 3-player combinations once you start with this structure. You've locked in all the other positions, and you just want to use the rest of your time to figure out what 3-player combination you can go for. Once you have those options, it's good to look at the pros and cons. For the first example, we have Trent, Eze, and Jota. You do have 2 premium defenders, which is quite nice. If you know one of them starts playing really well, you can get to another and still have 2 premium defenders. The other thing is that you have a bit less invested in your midfield. That being said, you still have a 10 million midfielder, but you have a little bit less invested than some of the other examples where, for instance, you upgrade Jota to Bruno Fernandes. Whether you think that upgrade is worth it, that's up for you to decide. You still have 2 premium defenders. You have that 8.5 million midfielder. But in this case, you don't have Liverpool assets. Gabriel can become Robbo, but it's up for you to decide there. The next option is the 5.5 million defender slot with Porro, Jota, and then Bruno Fernandes. You still have that 8.5 million mid. The con here, I would say, is that you're a bit between price points. And what I mean by that is that there's only a few 5.5 million defenders worth considering, I would say. And there's only 2 8.5 million midfielders in the game in Bruno and Odegaard. If you pick the wrong one, the wrong 5.5 million defender, there's not many to maneuver to, meaning you likely have to move down a price point, in which instance you could have just started with that lower price point and upgraded elsewhere. That's one con to this structure. And finally, the last structure is the 4.5 million defender, the 6.5 million mid in Bailey, and the 10.5 million mid in Palmer. You get that second premium midfielder slot, which is a very valuable slot to have, I would say. But you then only have 1 premium defender. Whether you're willing to take that sacrifice, that's up for you to decide. But I think it's really a useful way to look at your team, to kind of think, what is the combination I want to go for to cover certain price points? I think finding the locked players in your team and then playing around with the remaining slots to find the combination that you like best, it's a really effective way to create your team, and it helps to minimize the decision-making process. Once you lock in those other players, you can then play around with the other ones so that you can hone in on a particular section of your team. Now, I won't be showing my draft because I'm not 100% locked in on any of these combinations, but the pricing structure that I have seen for the other 12 slots is pretty much nailed for me. Now, I don't want to say I'm definitely going for a specific draft and then turn around after the deadline and have another, because like I said, I'm still deciding myself. But if you do want to see the team that I end up choosing, then subscribe to my channel and follow me on Twitter, where I'll be posting updates to my squad. That's it for today, folks. Drop a like if you guys enjoyed the video, and stay tuned for my next video, which will be a Game Week 1 review and my Game Week 2 plans ahead of the deadline. So stay tuned for those videos next week. Until next time, guys, have a good one.